This isn't just 5 flights, 10 flights, 15 flights. It's what, above 25?
The optics in some of this don't look good, and that's why we've taken this criticism to heart.
We're going to conduct a full review, and we'll see what happens.
This goes against everything Donald Trump said he would do in terms of draining the swamp.
It's a sad situation to see a major American city in this condition.
The Army Corps of Engineers has been given a mission to restore power on Puerto Rico.
This bureaucratic response is not working.
We need to move heaven and earth and do everything we can to assist the people who are suffering.
This is New Day with Chris Cuomo and Allison Camerata.
Good morning. Welcome to your New Day. The Trump administration is defending its response to storm-ravaged Puerto Rico. Fact, there are more than 10,000 people on the ground to help. Homeland Security Advisor Tom Burchett says more are on the way. The Pentagon has now appointed a 3-star general, Jeffrey Buchanan, to lead the logistical efforts on that island. Tom Bossert and General Buchanan, the 2 men now heading up the recovery effort, are set to join us here on New Day in the next half hour.
We can't wait to talk to them to get the real facts, because the situation in Puerto Rico on the ground is growing more desperate by the second if you talk to people on the ground there. Our reporters see widespread devastation. So our cameras were there as people tried to cross this river using a wire and rope after Maria wiped out a bridge. People in this town, about 40 miles outside of San Juan, are pleading for help. They're walking hours just to get some bread or rice. So the reality is very frightening. Look at this. This is drone video that was shot just yesterday. Obviously, you still see all of the houses, mangled roofs blown away. It's very hard for people to live in these conditions. CNN has the story covered with a team of reporters in Puerto Rico for you. So let's begin with Boris Sanchez. He's live in San Juan with more. Tell us what you've learned, Boris, about how supplies can get out to people.
Hey there, good morning, Allison. It certainly has been a challenge, and people here on the ground are asking us where is FEMA, where they can find FEMA, where they can find the supplies that they desperately need. We're standing outside a gas station in San Juan that just opened a few moments ago, and you see people lining up. There are massive, massive lines. If you look just down the street, this isn't street parking. These are about 100 vehicles, as far as the eye can see, parked here. They've been waiting in line for hours. I spoke to the gentleman that was at the front of the line. He told me that he got here at 9 p.m. last night. They ran out of gas, so he parked his car and decided to go to sleep, to wait until this morning when the police finally showed up to direct people into this gas station to get what they need. I also spoke to one woman who said these lines aren't just at gas stations. She was at a supermarket yesterday. She told me she was waiting for several hours to get inside, and she became extremely disappointed when she finally got inside and there wasn't any water available. The food that she was looking for just wasn't on the shelves. So it is a serious problem, this logistical bottleneck that's keeping a ton of supplies, some 10,000 shipping containers full of goods at the port. Hopefully today they'll have enough truckers and enough fuel to get them out into store shelves where help is desperately needed, Chris.
Look, just one example of the reality and proof of why it's not simply a good news story all around. Boris, thank you very much. Stay well down there. President Trump is standing behind his administration's response. He's been tweeting, saying Puerto Rico is devastated. True. Phone system, electric grid, many roads gone. True. FEMA and first responders are amazing. True. Governor said, great job. All true. But there seems to be a disconnect between what you're hearing in Washington about it all being good news and what the obvious reality is on the ground. CNN's Bill Weir has been there in Puerto Rico all week, seeing the destruction firsthand, telling us stories to help us connect to it. He joins us now live from San Juan. And Bill, look, as you know and you've seen it before, 2 things can be true at once. They can be doing a good job, getting a lot of resources, trying damn hard as only Americans can, and the situation on the ground can still be crisis of epic proportion.
Absolutely. But when you call 911, you don't want to hear a cascade of excuses. You want to hear, we hear you, we feel for you, and we're coming as fast as we can. This is the problem with an administration that spends every day trying to shoot the messenger. ultimately it doesn't hurt us. It hurts the people that we're trying to help by sounding the alarm down here. And yes, this is an epic challenge for FEMA. It's a quadruple whammy after Harvey and Irma and Mexico City and the rest of the Virgin Islands. We have fantastic military, but they have to worry about North Korea and Afghanistan and the Middle East, in addition now to humanitarian aid. All of those things are true, but the reality is I've yet to see one federal uniform outside of our hotel here in San Juan, out in the countryside, on the island of Vieques. We've had a dozen people come up to us and our team and ask, are you FEMA? So that's the reality. I would love to tell you amazing stories of airlifts and, you know, sailors amphibiously storming the beaches of these hardest hit communities. We just haven't seen it yet. So that's just the pure reality of the situation. We are hearing little bits of better news, like on Vieques, after our just gut-wrenching report of the 10,000 there who are stranded. The Coast Guard brought water. They did get a fuel shipment in there and a little bit of food, but that's just the beginning of the triage that's needed from the islands to the mountains, Chris.
Look, I hear you. Thank you for what you're doing. You have helped us understand a situation. Without you there, as difficult as it is, we wouldn't know the other side of the story. So, Bill, be well. Thank you very much. Joining us now on the phone is the governor of Puerto Rico, Ricardo Rosselló. Governor, it is good to hear you as always.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you for the opportunity and thoughts and prayers.
It is for you as long as you want it. If we can be of service, you have an outlet here as long as you want it. The president points to you as someone who is providing proof that the effort on the ground is great. And you know that there is a stark contrast between the word great and the conditions that way too many of your people are living in. How do you explain these two versions of reality?
Well, it is the limitation of the logistic support. Informing good news, you know, we're increasing those capabilities, but within the limitations, everybody had all hands on deck. That's what's important, and recognizing that, you know, the different components of the National Guard, military, FEMA, and our government are working together on the priorities. Certainly, Chris, there is a lot of work to do over here. We really need to increase the delivery rates. We really need to enhance our logistics. But also, from that side, I have to say that the administration has responded to our petitions. FEMA, Brock Long, has been on the phone virtually all the time with me, checking out how things are going. And this morning alone, I had a conversation with our generals, seeing how much of the capabilities, and we're increasing, about more than 1,000 personnel that's coming over here, just on the generals and militia side. And we're also starting to get some EMACs from New York and New Jersey, as well as other 17 states.
What do you say to the people on the island of Vieques, in the outlying areas outside of San Juan, when they hear that the recovery is going great? They can't believe that. They tell our reporters all the time, we haven't seen anything. We are in a state of pitched desperation. What do you say to them that the reaction so far has been great? They don't understand that.
I understand it. That's why I think you alluded it in your intro. There are two components that can happen at the same time. One, we are maximizing all of the resources that we have right now so that we can deliver goods, water, food, and supplies. And we do have a severe logistical limitation. It has been enhancing, but it's still nowhere near where it needs to be. However, we do have, again, information that a lot of these, personnel, people that will transport, that will manage fuel, that will be engineering bridges, that will be working with our medical personnel are here or are on their way. Again, we got a report this morning that over 1,000 of them, relative to yesterday, are here and are ready to be deployed. Missions are going all over Puerto Rico. We've identified 11 regional spots so that mayors can go get water, food, and supplies. And now really working on the logistics of diesel and fuel so that we can distribute them. We are starting to get some more tankers, and the truck drivers are starting to respond effectively as well.
What wasn't understood about the logistical considerations early on? Because obviously there's been a shift. They've changed. They're changing the infrastructure on the governmental side, who's in place, how many are in place, how they're doing things. What wasn't understood early on that needed to be shifted?
Well, here's what happened. We lost all energy. Therefore, we lost most of the telecoms. Roads were blocked, so we couldn't really get to a lot of the places in Puerto Rico. In the early onset, a lot of the truck drivers that we had, we couldn't communicate with them, so we couldn't ask them to report. And there was a lower percentage of truck drivers that was available at that juncture, and of trucks that weren't damaged to provoke the massive logistical effort that is needed. But therefore, as soon as that was identified very early on, petitions went out so that we can get equipment, fuel tankers, and that we could get personnel to drive them. Equipment comes in general through boats. It takes a little bit longer, and the air traffic control has been severely clogged. But I'm at least happy to report that thanks to the installation of provisional radars and the opening of 2 additional airports in Puerto Rico, we've been able to flexibilize and augment that bandwidth of air traffic to Puerto Rico. That is starting to increase. So, for example, because we were getting 7 flights an hour, and now we're up to 28 flights an hour based on this change, and we might get to 36 today. So things are starting to increase, and I recognize it is my biggest challenge and my biggest concern, that there are people in Puerto Rico that, we haven't reached, and we need to reach them, and we need the capabilities to reach them. And this is why it is important that we look at this as a whole government effort, so that the local government, federal government, the different capabilities of the militia and the different capabilities of the National Guard can work together, have a logistic plan set in place, see results, set expectations, and the people of Puerto Rico know.
Governor, I think I lost you. If you can still hear us, I hope you know that the reason we keep reporting on the need is because it's real. It's not about knocking the government or the president or getting into a political spat. If we don't tell their stories, if we're not honest about the need, we are disrespecting the people on that island. That's why we have to tell the truth about the situation, and to keep the urgency and the demand here in America to be able to get involved, to help. That is fueled by people knowing about the situation. That's why we're doing it. Governor, you are welcome here. Whenever you need to get the word out, we're a call away.
Thank you, and we do need that help. We are still calling for it, and all hands on deck. It's the only way to get Puerto Rico out of this very serious situation.
Let us know what we can do. Be well. Allison.
So, Chris, we'll have much more on the crisis in Puerto Rico throughout the hour. But up next, Health Secretary Tom Price caught in the middle of a private plane controversy that reportedly cost taxpayers about $1 million. We have all of the new details, and sources tell us those details have the White House fuming. The controversy is growing over Health Secretary Tom Price's use of private planes on the taxpayers' dime. CNN now reporting that Price also used military aircraft to travel overseas. Price is offering to pay the government back, but only $50,000, the cost of his one seat, not the total cost, as reported to be more than $1 million. CNN's Joe Johns is live at the White House with all the details. Hi, Joe.
Morning, Allison. Members of the House and Senate from both parties are now asking questions about this issue involving jet travel and the health secretary. Tom Price has promised to pay the money back and says he will not take any more chartered flights, but the Inspector General is looking into it. The president, for his part, would certainly love to get beyond this issue, but the drip, drip, drip of information continues.
Will the check that you're writing?
Health Secretary Tom Price under fire for spending hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxpayer money for trips on private jets. And CNN has learned it doesn't stop there. An Air Force official says Price also took military aircraft for 2 multi-stop international trips earlier this year, racking up a $500,000 bill, according to Politico. Those overseas trips, which the White House approved, bringing the total cost of Price's travel over $1 million.
We've heard the concern and the criticism, and we look forward to the Inspector General's report.
Price pledging Thursday to pay back a fraction of this total, writing a check for $51,887.31, the cost of his seats on the chartered planes, but not the military flights.
To pay for my portion of those trips. This is unprecedented.
The White House releasing a statement Thursday defending Price's travel on military aircraft, insisting that it is sometimes an appropriate and necessary use of resources. As for the 26 chartered flights Price has taken since May, the administration taking a tougher tone.
The White House does not have a role on the front end of approving private chartered flights at the agencies, and that's something that we're certainly looking into from this point forward.
Sources tell CNN that Price's partial repayment for his flights is not helping his case with the president, but that Mr. Trump is not yet ready to fire his health secretary, although names of possible replacements are being floated.
I am not happy about it, and I let him know it.
This wasteful use of taxpayer money flying in the face of one of Mr. Trump's key campaign promises.
It is time to drain the damn swamp.
It's also the same type of spending Price railed against then House Speaker Nancy Pelosi for in 2010.
I want to say to the Speaker, don't you fly over our country in your luxury jet and lecture us on what it means to be an American.
Now, the Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin and the EPA Administrator Scott Pruitt have also come under fire for using taxpayer dollars for costly flights. And according to Politico and the Washington Post, Ryan Zinke, the Interior Secretary, has taken some flights too, including a $12,000 flight to his hometown for a political trip. The spokesperson for the department says that trip was approved by ethics officials. Back to you.
All right, Joe, thank you very much. Let's discuss all of this with CNN Chief Legal Analyst Jeffrey Toobin and CNN contributor and former director for the U.S. Office of Government Ethics, Walter Shaub. Walter, I want to start with you because you described what you saw unfolding yesterday with Tom Price's story as, quote, really weird. Yeah. What was it in particular that stuck out to you?
Well, you've got the Secretary of Interior flying around on a jet owned by the oil and gas industry. And then even stranger, we're paying for it. There's authority for the acceptance of reimbursement of outside travel from outside sources if you go through a process with the ethics officials. And when they reference the ethics officials, I thought that might be what they're talking about. But apparently we paid the bill for that.
So the word from the inside here, the spin is, look, maybe it was too much, but this happens. People use the government flights when they're in government office. That's how they get around. It's often easier. They don't have to pre-plan as much. They can move last second. It happens. Do you buy that?
No, not at all. This doesn't happen, and on the rare occasion when it does, it's always big news. You heard Secretary Price himself when he was in Congress shouting, "Don't you fly over America in your luxury jets." And then he ran off and started doing that. This is completely outside the culture of the executive branch and completely inconsistent with the ethical principles of preserving the public's trust and their resources. But this is also the inevitable consequences of a bad tone from the top that I started warning about in a speech on January 11th when I risked my career to warn the president that if he keeps behaving the way he does, keeping his properties and advertising his properties, his cabinet and even lower level officials are going to follow his lead.
But yet, President Trump is reportedly quite upset about this with Tom Price, Jeffrey. So despite whatever liberties he may be taking, he's upset with Tom Price.
Well, when you look at the federal budget, which is over $1 trillion, $1 million is less than a drop in the bucket. But Donald Trump understands how the public perceives things. And this $1 million, these $1 million private plane flights, that's what people are going to remember about Tom Price. They're not going to remember anything else. And that's embarrassing to the administration about someone who appears to be, luxuriating on the public stock.
He's offering to pay $52,000 back for his seat.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I wonder if that makes it worse or better, because all it does is point out the contrast that the taxpayers are on the hook for $1 million and he's paying 50 grand. It's a gesture. It sounds to me like his job is hanging by a thread. Remember also, Tom Price is a former member of Congress who came in significant part, to do health care reform, which of course has gone up in flames. So the president is ill-disposed towards him to start with.
All right, other controversy.
Yes, sir.
The email usage. Let's start with you on an ethical level, before we get to any legal exposure because of Kushner being part of that investigation. What is the rule about using a private email account if I'm working in the White House?
Walter.
Oh, you're asking me. Well, the rule is you're supposed to use the government email.
Do you have to? Is it a mandatory thing? Can you also use? Can you get a waiver? Is there a way to disclose it? What's the deal?
No, there's no waiver for it. They're covered by the Presidential Records Act, which, unlike the Federal Records Act that covers other agencies, mandates the retention of all work-related records. Now, they do have a policy to sort of be a catch-all when people violate the rule. They are supposed to forward copies of the emails to the White House system. So
just relevant ones or all of them?
Well, all of them if they're work-related because of the Presidential Records Act.
So there is some discretion?
Only if they're only if they're not work-related. The problem is if you go around using your private system, you're just inviting investigators to come to check your email, your personal email, to see if you followed the rule to forward them to the White House.
I thought we learned this lesson, Jeffrey. Can I have the 2 years of my life back from the last presidential race?
Right. I mean, it is, the hypocrisy is almost too perfect. I mean, every rally, the chant was lock her up because Hillary Clinton used a private server.
And is that different than using a private email account?
I don't see how it's different.
Well, it's bigger. I mean, you install a private server in your home as opposed to using Hotmail.
But it's still a
Hotmail.
I went there. Thank you.
It's 2004 on a New Day here.
You got us wrapped because of that. The Hotmail got the whole segment ended.
You don't really, honestly, you don't see any distinction between a private server?
No, absolutely not. I mean,
the
rule is either that you use government email or you don't. And the fact that one's a private server or one's Hotmail, if anybody remembers what Hotmail is, or Gmail, which is a little more contemporary, they're private, they are non-governmental emails.
We have to go, but we know what the distinction will be. It'll be that she had control of the emails, she decided what she'd turn over, and that there were efforts to destroy things by Hillary Clinton that we haven't seen evidence of here.
But Jared Kushner's lawyer has said we are turning over those emails.
Right.
In other words, he is deciding.
He's doing the same thing.
So it's the same thing. You're right. It is different because he had a private server, but the question is whether that's a distinction that makes a difference.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. You can all reach me on Hotmail.
Has the White House done enough to help people in Puerto Rico? The president is saying, yes, we're doing great. Listen to the governor. He says everything he asks for, we give him. Okay, tell that to that man walking in the water in front of your face right now. Tell that to the people who have no power, no water, no chance of sustainable life right now. Do they feel it's great? Of course not. And that's why it is a tale of two realities there right now. We're going to check in with one of the people in charge of the effort next. All right, President Trump watching the show this morning, tweeting in response to the Puerto Rican governor's interview that we just did, saying, you see that? The Puerto Rican governor, Ricardo Rosselló, just stated the administration and the president, every time we've spoken, they've delivered. He then said something else. He said, the fact is, Puerto Rico has been destroyed by 2 hurricanes. Then there's this sentence. Please focus on it. Big decisions will have to be made as to the cost of its rebuilding. What does that mean? I didn't see anything like that after Florida, after Texas. Let's discuss with somebody at the center of this relief effort. Homeland Security Advisor Tom Bosser. Tom, thank you for joining us. Can you help me understand? What does that mean? There are big decisions that'll have to be made. It sounds like it's an open-ended question as to whether or not the government is prepared to do whatever is necessary.
Chris, good morning. You're welcome. And let me tell you two answers. First, we always have big discussions after disasters as to cost. But what you need to know is that Puerto Rico started this one $72 billion in debt. So the president's 1,000% right. We're going to have to figure out how to handle this as we move forward. What he did do in the meantime.
Hold on one second. Hold on. Let me just.
Well, no, let me.
No, you'll make all your points, Tom. I promise. I'm not looking for an argument, but I don't understand the connection between $72 billion in debt and whether you're going to help them rebuild. Just make that point for me.
Yeah. So let me finish answering. The idea here, Chris, is with them being in debt, they don't have enough ready liquid cash to pay their normal share, like Florida and Texas had ready share money to pay. So what we're going to do, and the president's already done it, is give a 180-day cost share adjustment. Federal government's paying 100% of the tab here to make sure lives are safe. We'll worry about the big decisions later. That's the president's point.
So the president's point is we'll do whatever it takes, and we'll do it as time demands. That's what he meant when he said big decisions will have to be made as to the cost of its rebuilding?
The president's already doing what it takes. What he's doing is what any good leader does, is looking at the horizon for decisions that are going to come over the next 3-4 weeks and the next 3-4 months.
Okay, so we'll assume that means that the full energy and effort will be there to rebuild Puerto Rico, just like we need to see in Florida and Texas, and we'll stay on that from an accountability angle. Now to the larger question. There's no question that Governor of Puerto Rico, Rosselló, says you guys have been responsive, you've been active, you have been there for him. That has never been questioned. He also acknowledges that the reality for millions of people on the ground is unacceptable and that the logistical scheme down there has been inadequate. Both things can be true. Do you accept that?
Well, I don't accept that we're doing anything short of everything we can do. Yes, I accept that the people are going to see at the very end the last person in the most hardest to reach area is going to receive the assistance in a way that's less acceptable than we'd like to. We'd like to give them a bottle of water and food immediately, but I do accept that there's going to be a difference between a full-throated, adequate response and the complete satisfaction of bringing that entire territory back to its full functional state.
It's no question. It's not the last person in the farthest outreach. Our reporters, you go 25 minutes outside San Juan, you get a very different reality. And that is the truth of the situation. It's not exaggerated. It's not hyped. It's not unfair. It's not non-contemporaneous. It's the reality right now on the ground. There are too many people in a state of desperation. That's just the fact. Would you differ with that?
No, I guess, Chris, the slightly argumentative tone I'm taking here is that earlier today, probably 6:20, right, 20 minutes ago, you said to our colonel in the field that no one doubts our efforts or commitment, his efforts or commitment. That colonel's there because of President Trump. And now what I hear from you is that you're doubting his efforts and commitment. So which is it?
No, I think that this is about how you're perceiving it versus how it's said. I'll say it again. The Corps of Engineers are good men and women. We know they're working their asses off. We understand that that's what's happening there. That's what they do every time out. Nobody's questioning that there is a level of commitment. The question is, has it been there from jump? We know the president was slow to come to this with his public statements. That's a matter of fact. It's public record. You can see it from his Twitter. If you want to have that debate, I'll have it with you. I think it's a little beside the point right now. I'm not saying that FEMA wasn't there, that Brock Long wasn't locked in. But logistically, General Honore has no reason to say that the logistics have been screwed up on the ground and needed to be adjusted gratuitously. That's not the kind of guy he is. We know what he did after Katrina. We know he knows the kind of situation. So criticism of the logistics, things needing to be done better, which is echoed by the extra manpower and military influence you put in place, seems to be the reality. It's not about shooting down the White House and building up the Corps of Engineers. It's about a balanced reality.
No, I don't think so. I think the criticism yesterday from you and your network wasn't well placed. I think what President Trump did was put forces in place before the storm, not slow to respond after it. We had a 4-star admiral, and yesterday your reporters were focusing on a 3-star general. We've got a system in place that deployed more men and women before the storm for this storm than we did for the last one. And we're coming off the third in a row successful response effort. Now, to your point, though, Chris, I concede it's a difficult situation in an island involved in a major hurricane to bring in all those supplies and then successfully distribute them. I think that's the governor's distinction earlier today. He's in receive mode of millions and millions of gallons of water, food, 10,000 people that he's bringing onto his island to help distribute the aid to his people, and now he's running into closed roads, down power lines, and the other destructive forces of nature. So that is, and you've seen this. There was a comparison to a war zone that you've attended earlier this morning on your show. What you're now seeing, though, is the collective unified effort of all levels of government overcoming that challenge.
There's no question that the effort is there. It's about, was it there from jump? And again, you can see it as criticism of the president. That's not the intention. It's about delivering help to those people in need. That's all that really matters here. We can have all these other debates later on, but you know, in terms of, well, this is the media or misplaced criticism, General Honore ain't a reporter. Okay? He's a guy who knows the field, knows logistics, knows what it takes. He's been critical. What do you say to him?
Well, I've known General Honore since I served with him during the Katrina response, and I talk to him regularly. In fact, I talked to him yesterday. What he's observing is the same logistical challenges. What he's wrong on was his assessment that we didn't have a 3-star general command in charge or in place in time. That's an assessment based on his experiences in Katrina, which quite frankly, this government has fixed in the last 8 to 10 years since. That 3-star general was there. In fact, he took ground force command from our 4-star admiral who had it prior to the storm. So what we do is we forward deploy, and we have assets controlled by Northern Command, but we have a military command structure that's in place in between there that we either base out of Fort Sam Houston or off of the Kearsarge, which is what we did this time off the island. So we were afloat with men and women here to help. And we can debate it later, Chris, but I want to make sure today you know that Brock Long is committed to this response. I'm committed to this response. And between the two of us, we've got the Homeland Security and FEMA emergency management community headed in the right direction.
I have no question about what Brock Long has been up to. That doesn't mean that criticism of the president waiting about a week before he started talking about this is unfair. There's no question that you've made changes to improve the logistical command on the ground in Puerto Rico. That's just true. We're seeing it every day. Why did you have to change it? Because it was inadequate. You can see that as criticism. I see it as an adjustment of reality. What's the difference?
I just see your assessment as wrong, Chris. So
where is it wrong?
To debate on that.
Where is it wrong?
What we do is we have to adjust to. So I guess I'll back up. Every disaster is different. Let me walk you through the brief history of how we've responded to each one correctly. We responded to the disaster in Texas with the affordable and reasonable access to trucks, restoration crews, and so forth that brings the continental contiguous United States. We responded to Florida because it's a peninsula differently. We had to mobilize a naval and marine force because we had to bring fuel via water into that disaster. That was a constraint. Now we're dealing with an island over 1,100 miles away from the closest sea and airports in Florida, and we have to adjust to the circumstances on the ground. Every viewer understands that. We didn't adjust because we were wrong or poor in our planning. We adjusted because the conditions warranted.
Well, we'll see what lessons are learned coming out of it. And again, the exigency is taking care of the people that we see in distress. And, you know, I don't think it requires an apology to say it's not time to congratulate ourselves for an effort when you got 1.5 million people that don't have access to clean water.
No,
Nobody's questioning your efforts. Well, I'm saying just in response to what the president is seeming to imply about this, nobody's questioning your efforts. We appreciate them. You please let us know what we can do to assist you in your efforts to get the information out to help the recovery.
Yep, thank you very much. And our prayers and our thoughts and our efforts today are with the men and women of Puerto Rico.
Absolutely. Allison.
Okay, Chris, as you and Tom Bossert were just discussing, a 3-star general is now on the ground in Puerto Rico to take the lead on military operations in this relief effort. So joining us on the phone is that General Jeffrey Buchanan. Good morning, General.
Hey, good morning, Allison. How are you?
I'm well. It's great to have you take the time to talk to us. I know you have a daunting day ahead of you, and weeks, I should say. I don't know if you just heard that interview with Homeland Security Advisor Tom Bossert talking about what day would have been best for you to arrive. You arrived yesterday. Should you have been on the ground earlier?
Well, ma'am, we had part of our team on the ground starting on the 4th of September in preparation for Irma, and they've been here ever since. But the right answer is this is from a U.S. Northern Command perspective. General Robinson, you know, this was dominantly in the beginning a maritime response. And so we had the Joint Force Maritime Component Command led by Admiral Davison and Rear Admiral Hughes off the coast providing that support, while we in the land component provided support to Texas for Harvey and Florida for Irma. Yeah. And now that we're going to a dominantly land-based operation, General Robinson made the decision to switch Schwitz.
Because it's 9 days after the hurricane. And so we just keep hearing reports and seeing them with our own eyes of people who are desperate. You know, they're desperate for water, they're desperate for food, and we hear about these supply containers that are sitting at the port, unable to get to people because of lack of drivers, lack of fuel. So would it have helped if you, a land-based general, were there earlier?
I think that we had exactly the right support. The problem, you know, from the beginning with a maritime-based approach, and Admiral Hughes and his team have been doing phenomenal work here. But the problem is that we've had all kinds of massive damage to the island's infrastructure, including routes. And so much of our support has been from off the shore, based off of Navy ships, as well as Air Force, air components. So Navy, Marine Corps, and Army helicopters delivering supplies. Just talking to the FEMA regional administrator, there are a lot of containers at the ports, but the FEMA containers that have come in prior to the storm and after the storm are actually up and moving. A lot of those are commercial contracts. We still need them to get moved, but that's really dependent on a lot of what's going on here as far as civilians working in Puerto Rico.
Well, let's talk about that, because we understand there's somewhere between, there's different reports, 3,000 and 10,000 in these containers. And as you say, these are kind of everyday supplies. These are food and water, not FEMA. These are the things that the island just needs in a regular day to try to function. Can you get these moving today?
Right. Well, we work in direct support of FEMA, so it really depends on what are in those containers, and the things like food, water, and fuel are desperately needed by all the people, and that's where our priority is to move. But a lot of those containers are just regular commercial goods, TVs, things like this. And so it's not our priority, and it's not FEMA's priority to move those. So we work to help FEMA, which is all really in direct support of the Commonwealth. And we're working together as a team to help the people get back on their feet.
Now that you've seen this with your own eyes, now that you're on the ground, do you think that the 10,000 federal responders that are there are enough?
Well, we're certainly bringing in more. For example, on the military side, we're bringing in both Air Force, Navy, and Army medical capabilities, in addition to more aircraft, rotary wing aircraft, helicopters of different types, and a lot of logistical support. So, you know, the answer is no, it's not enough, and we're bringing more in.
When will those arrive?
Well, they really start. We get some of our logistics capability, and more aircraft start arriving tonight. The medical capability, depending on the service, arrives over the next 2 weeks, and it starts as early as this week and stretches over the next 2 weeks. I mean, so one of these is as large. We've got the Navy ship Comfort coming. We've got an Army combat support hospital, which is think about it as a mobile tent-based, power-generated 44-bed hospital. So it's all coming. It's just going to take time to build up.
Well, I mean, General, you know, back to the original point, the Navy ship Comfort, could that have been in place 7 days ago? Could that have been in place sooner? I mean, listen, General, I'm only asking because we hear from so many people who say they're desperate for their medication, they're desperate for help.
Right. And we have been providing a lot of medical support, but we know that there's a lot more needed. So shouldn't it have been there days earlier? Man, I'm not going to judge anything. I think that we're here now and we're working forward to help the people get what they need. General, how long do you think this rebuilding effort will take? Well, as far as the complete recovery under FEMA's lead, you know, this is a very, very long duration mission. I mean, think about it from the Army Corps of Engineers, which has been asked to take lead for power distribution on the electrical grid. You know, we're doing fine probably with power generation, although generators and power plants need fuel. But the problem is the entire infrastructure as far as transmission of power is down. So it's not going to be a short-term project to rebuild all those electrical lines. And you know, we're going to be here in support of FEMA and the Commonwealth for as long as we need to get the work done and get the people back up on their feet. Understood. You have a lot of work ahead of you. General Jeffrey Buchanan, thanks so much for taking the time to talk to us. Thanks, Allison. Chris.
All right, so you keep hearing this theme of there's tremendous need on the ground. And that drives an urgency for more in terms of response. CNN chief medical correspondent Dr. Sanjay Gupta is live in San Juan. He is seeing the medical need firsthand. You've heard those interviews, Sanjay. You've heard from the general just kind of a, not so much a defense, but an explanation of the efforts on the ground and the challenges. From the political side, there's no question that the president wants approval and acceptance and praise for what he's done so far. He doesn't want any blame. But the reality is, whatever's being done clearly isn't enough. What do your eyes tell you?
Well, you know, it's interesting. I think that in some ways, I would say that so much of the force of the relief effort was on getting some of these goods to Puerto Rico, which is very understandable. You need to get things on the ground here, medications, antibiotics, pain medications, but also fuel, sat phones, all those things that you know, Chris, are needed after a disaster like this. But I think that what has happened, though, is that after it arrived, it didn't really go anywhere. And I think from a medical standpoint, the analogy is you've created a really good treatment, and that should be applauded, that should be celebrated. But if the people who needed the treatment didn't get it, what have you really accomplished? That's what I sort of thought as I was listening to those interviews. And it's also something that I saw as we went outside of San Juan to visit places last night.
This is 62-year-old Josefina Alvarez's reality. Look at what happened to us, she pleads. Nobody is taking care of us. For 2 weeks, Miss Alvarez has been here, in a shelter, an hour outside of San Juan, but may as well be on a different island altogether. And like thousands of others, she's become really sick.
We have no hospital to get her because all the emergency are closed because they have no electricity and we have no place to get her. She's getting more complicated.
Dr. Astrid Morales, a volunteer at the shelter, has tried everything to get Alvarez to a hospital.
The ambulance we saw just left.
Yeah, because they have no authorization from their bosses to get.
That seems ridiculous.
Yeah,
I mean,
tell
we're
me
in the
about
middle
it.
we're in the middle of a disaster, in the middle of a
we're
crisis, and you're waiting for paperwork?
Yeah.
This is a very treatable problem under any other circumstance.
Sure.
Get to the hospital, put an IV.
Probably a few hours of IV antibiotics, and then she can go home.
What happens if she doesn't get this?
Well, she might get her infection to the blood and get complicated with sepsis and even death.
There's no communication anywhere here, so we give her our satellite phone to try and call for help.
Buena, doctor. Es la doctora Astrid Morales.
Puerto Rico's Secretary of Health finds a hospital for Alvarez, but then the same problem, how to get her there.
We can take the patient. And I'm a doctor. We can take the patient ourselves. I know time's of the essence here. The health secretary is there.
Well, he already accepted the patient, so
we can do that. You can't even believe what's happening here. I mean, there's no power, there's no water, she's a diabetic, she doesn't have insulin, she has an infection that could threaten her life. No ambulance will take her to the hospital. That's what's happening here. It's okay. Right here.
She wants to sit from this
Oh, because she has the ulceration, yeah. Okay, move the wheelchair out, please. There's nothing about this that makes sense. I mean, look what we're doing here. We're transporting a patient. This is not an ambulance, but it's the only thing that we really have right now to get her to the care that she needs.
There are probably thousands of patients who are in similar shelters with no power, no water, no medications, no way out. There are probably thousands more who are still in their homes who haven't even been able to get to a shelter. So she's just one example of what's happening here.
She's been desatting a bit. So we're trying to just get her into the triage area. Okay, one more. Watch out. Watch out.
I need lift help, please.
Thank you. And Josefine Alvarez, we understand, is still in this disaster management assistance team tent, and that is part of HHS, Health and Human Services. She's scheduled to get surgery. But again, she's one person out of thousands who may be in a similar predicament. She's going to get her treatment, she's going to get her therapy, but there may be many more out there in shelters and in their homes still who need this exact sort of therapy.
Right, Sanjay. I mean, you just happened to find this one woman. You happen to be able to have the resources and skill to help. This is just one story. There are 3.5 million people there in Puerto Rico. And so when we hear the death toll and how blessedly low it has been, 13, I think, 16, something like that at the last count, you know, it's very concerning about what's going to happen in these next days if there are other people in that predicament, Sanjay.
Yeah, and you know, one thing Allison and I point out is that we measure death tolls because I think they're an easy number to measure. You know, it's very clear. X number of people have died and X number of people have survived. It's not like that in real life. I mean, there can be countless people who are suffering who may be alive, but they're really caught in between life and death in some way, and their lives are forever changed. It doesn't end for them. So I think that death toll number is one that obviously we pay attention to, but we should take that in context. And when people talk about humanitarian crisis, that is not a term that should be used lightly, but what it means is that people die that didn't need to. People whose deaths could have been prevented. They didn't die as a result of the hurricane specifically. They died as a result of its aftermath, and that's incredibly sad when you see that happening.
And you have to stay on it to know it. Sanjay has lived a life in the media doing this. It's not now. It's not next week. It's a month from now. It's 3 months from now, 6 months from now that you'll see these effects. Sanjay, thank you for being one of those helpful people, my brother. Thank you for what you do.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, guys.
We have more on what's going on in Puerto Rico. But first, police officers, we all know they go beyond the call of duty. How ditching their uniforms is helping them battle the opioid crisis. That's next.